Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 148, with Jarrod Morgan of Measure Learning. So we're talking all about ensuring academic integrity for student learning experiences, how to do that, and how to avoid the pitfalls of what I really appreciate Jarrod calling quote-unquote security theater. So making sure that you have kind of verifiable data that you can reference to make sure that student learning, is in fact happening, and that the students are proving it. So we're talking about things like proctoring and just being able to ensure that students are not cheating on their various assessments and everything that they're submitting in their classes. So, just really great perspectives. I love Jarrod's passion for this subject. So it's really great to talk with him and learn more about his background, the work that Measure Learning is doing. So definitely connect with him and Measure and the stuff that we mentioned in the show notes for this episode. But after this brief word from our sponsor, this is episode number 148 with Jarrod Morgan.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
We are here continuing to explore all the nuances of the higher education world and student experience, focusing a little bit more on the academic experience, which is always great for me, just a little bit more out of my wheelhouse. So I will benefit just as much as you all listening. So just to not wait any longer, let's just get right into it. We will start out as we always do. Jarrod, if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself and give a brief overview of your professional background and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. It's great to be here, Dustin. Thank you for having me. My name is Jarrod Morgan. I'm the founder and chief strategy officer of Measure Learning, which is formerly known, and I guess better known as ProctorU. It's the home of the ProctorU proctoring suite of services. I started in higher education back in 2006, working at a small online college as the director of technology. Was kind of a small upstart operation. We had students all over the world and needed a way to figure out if they actually understood the content, knew the content. And it was a challenge doing that. If somebody was in one state or another state, had access to a library or had access to a campus, it was very difficult. So what we needed to figure out was a way to do it remotely. And so I created this little system that allowed us to monitor a student over a webcam the same way we would have done if they would have walked into one of our, walked into the room with us. And so it worked out really well. Students really, really liked it, liked having the freedom to test at home and test kind of any time of the day. And so we started calling this ProctorU. This was back in 2008. And we were asked to give a presentation at a conference. And once that presentation took place, we had a lot of schools contact us and say, hey, we'd really like for you to do this for us. And so a business was born, and we moved it outside of the college so it can serve other institutions. And sort of in the next couple of years, it's like a 10-year process of being an overnight success or whatever, right? It was quite a journey, but we're the largest provider of online testing services in the world. We have now a lot more than just proctoring. We have test delivery services. We have a team of psychometricians that can study test content and how effective it is. We can help people create content. We have item banking tools. We have all sorts of things now to deliver a whole assessment program, not just the proctoring.
Yeah, because I wanted to kind of understand better what Measure Learning and ProctorU does. So I think you kind of gave a little bit of an explanation there, but I guess it could maybe lead into the next question to kind of give a little bit more context, because certainly over the last 2 years, more institutions have incorporated kind of remote proctoring tools and things. And definitely, we've talked about it once on the show before last year, where there's definitely a lot there because people are used to sitting in a lecture hall and having a TA, proctor an exam when people are doing it in person. But then there's maybe some confusion or hesitancy or resistance to remote proctoring. So I guess to better explain the work that your team does, when do you feel like proctoring is most appropriate? And if, I guess, maybe you can incorporate, remote proctoring in particular, when that is most appropriate.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you asked that question, because I think it's broader than just a question of whether remote proctoring is something people are comfortable with. What really changed for us in the last couple of years, we've been around since 2008 and worked with thousands of different organizations and institutions and millions of students. And what changed in the pandemic, and I think this is really indicative of how you set up a healthy program, if you can kind of learn from this, is until 2020, when the pandemic started, ProctorU was used primarily as a choice. And so you were a student at an institution, or you were taking a certification exam as a post grad, something like that, and you had an option to drive somewhere, or you were given an option to do it at home over a webcam. And that element of choice really made the test taker feel that this was their decision and they were comfortable with all of the ins and outs of it. What changed in the pandemic, for obvious reasons that were really nobody's fault, is that there wasn't another option, right? The traditional in-person options were taken away. And that's when you saw a lot of negative reaction to the idea of testing at home, because it wasn't something people were being asked if they wanted to do. It was something that they had to do. And it's just a very different human reaction when somebody is told they have to do something. Then there's an element of suspicion there. And so what I think we have to do as an organization, as a company, right, but we also have to work with our institutional partners, is make sure that students understand what it is that they're expected to do in this situation. So they know what to expect, they know where to be, and try to give them as much choice in the matter as possible. If it's possible to offer them a traditional testing environment, then by all means, like, that should be a part of the experience. If it's not, then make sure that we offer them a choice of where they can be, or what time when they can actually connect and take the exam. So the more choice that you put into the situation, the more students' comfort level improves with doing this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's like such an important point to clarify what you said too, of like people being forced to do things, because that definitely is the story of the last 2 years. Is that especially with the outset, pretty much 2 years ago, almost as of the recording of this, where everybody was taking this hard pivot into remote learning, not really true online learning, and people didn't choose to take their classes that way. Yeah, like that's sort of so interwoven into people's point of view on this. And then I guess, like, if you want to kind of sort of build off this too, because I think part of it is that there wasn't great there wasn't always great orientation, or sort of like kind of pre-gaming people to these tools and how they're used, or why they're, that sort of thing. It's just sort of like you said, it's just a lot of like that sort of like hard forcing, just being like, you're taking your exam, you're doing it over Zoom, and we're using this tool, or what, these sort of things. And people just didn't understand what's going on, because it's like, wait, somebody, like, you're watching me or tracking me, or like, I don't understand what's happening. But then when you kind of explain it, they get it more. So I don't know if that was something that you witnessed as well.
Yeah, I mean, we witnessed a lot of that. I mean, it wasn't easy to be in education technology over the last couple of years, because it became a necessity. But the issue was kind of what you said. I mean, we did not have a controlled rollout of any of these changes. We sort of you had a lot of faculty that had never taught online before, and some of them had no desire to teach online. You had students who did not choose to go to school online, and were having to go to school online. You had entire programs and college, not just universities, but engineering programs and math programs and everything. They had their entire curriculum set up a different way, and had to pivot and figure out how to do it online with essentially no warning. And so the byproduct of that is you end up with people who are, nerves are already frazzled. We're in the middle of a 100-year pandemic. You have faculty and administrators doing things that they did not have time to train to do, and may have not been given all the right tools to do it. You have students who their student experience drastically changed on a dime. I have family members that they unfortunately were freshmen in this year, right, in 2020. And so can you imagine, like, you think your whole kind of growing up, you think you're going to have this college experience, and then you get on college campus, and after one semester, it sort of overnight changes, and you haven't even had a chance to make friends yet, and you're being told to stay in your dorm, and it's just a bad experience all around for everybody. And that a lot of that negativity manifested in people being very frustrated with the specific things that they were being asked to do. And it wasn't just proctoring, right? It was people got frustrated with, having to watch lectures the way that they were being asked to watch lectures. They were frustrated with their lack of campus amenities that they could do, right? And so I think what we're seeing now, we're recording this in sort of the beginning of 2022, is that we're migrating back towards whatever normal looks like in the post-pandemic world, right? And when we get there, what does it look like to make? I think a lot of these online tools are going to be permanent parts of education, and I don't mean that to make people panic. I think what that means is we're going to be able to look at the last couple of years and grab the things that really worked and expand on those, and then start to work on the things that didn't work. And one of the things that I look at that was the lesson of the last couple of years is if students and faculty don't know what to expect, or they kind of collide into this without a lot of preparation, it is, even if it goes extraordinarily well by traditional definitions, people are able to test, people are able to, students are able to take their exams without issue. They're able to get their technical issues taken care of. Faculty are comfortable that people weren't cheating. Even if all of those boxes are checked, the perception still remains negative if people weren't really prepared going into it, or didn't really know what to expect. And so for us, that was the lesson learned through here, is we have really tried to leverage up on material and communication about what to expect from, not just from the exam experience, but in terms of privacy. One of the things that we started in the middle of this was something called the Student Bill of Rights. And there's a website there that, if I knew I was going to say this, I would have had it ready to go. I believe it's studentbillofrights.org, I think, but we'll have to go back and check to make sure. But what we put together was sort of setting some material out there that could be a conversation starter about what should students actually expect from a technology provider that's a part of their educational experience. And because at the beginning of this, people were really upset, and what we sort of found was there just wasn't a lot of uniformly accepted standards of what good practice was. And so I think I'm an optimist, right? So the positive side coming out of this is we have a whole bunch of new things to work on that can make students feel more comfortable, that can make faculty feel comfortable that the material that they're teaching is actually, the credentials they're giving are actually to the people that did the work. Students can feel comfortable about knowing what to expect with their experience and how student data is handled. And we can feel comfortable as a company that we have a set of operating procedures that check all of those boxes as we go forward.
Well, yeah, and two, just like that, you're not like empowering, partners with a tool and it's being like, hey, good luck, like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you're earnestly trying to be like, okay, well, let's outline what it means to, like properly handle student data and like, all those sort of things, and have it be really clearly summarized in that Bill of Rights. And we'll get the link after this to make sure we get it just right and everything. But because I think like we're entering into, I think, the phase of hybrid learning where like, there's going to be a lot of holdover of, the best parts of kind of digital student experience and all the things that we've learned and everything, and kind of have, the opportunity to kind of take the best of both worlds of the sort of human elements, in-person things and all that. But then also have these tools that could maybe, do things better, in certain kind of places and everything, and not use them when they aren't. And one thing I know when we were doing prep for this is that I believe in the recent past, you all dropped AI proctoring that you were doing. So I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that, because I find that very interesting, of maybe that idea of the dichotomy of like, where does it make sense to kind of have humans in the process and everything, to just kind of give more control over things.
I mean, I love sharing that story for sure. I mean, if you think about one of the things that was really challenging for us as we navigated this pandemic was what we would find with some organizations was the underlying issue was that there were a lot of people that did not believe in testing at all, or did not believe in that academic integrity, either A, was an issue, or B, wasn't an issue worth really trying to solve. And the problem when we walk into a situation as an organization, that's what we do is build programs with academic integrity, so you know that the person getting the grade or the credential is the one that did the work. If you don't believe that that's important, then we really shouldn't get into anything. And we shouldn't be doing anything as an organization with that school. And that's kind of where we found ourselves with the AI product. Was, it was an automated product, and what it was designed to do was not how it was being used on the ground. So what it was designed to do was be a tool that monitors a student while they take an exam. And after that exam is complete, the faculty member is supposed to go back and review what that system recorded or found and decide whether or not, the student needed to be confronted about whatever happened. And what we found was 9 out of 10 videos, or 9 out of 10 sessions that required a faculty member to engage and figure out if there was a problem, were never opened a single time. And that is not an indictment of anybody in the process. I think it's more of a reality of the situation that everybody has been in and is in. That is an inordinate amount of work to put on anybody in the process. And so what ends up happening when faculty or whoever it is that's asked to review the video doesn't actually review it is that the system, the sessions that the system says are problems are sometimes just assumed to be problems. And in its essence, you're making the algorithm make the decision. And we have always felt, and that's why we took the extraordinary move to sunset that product, was we have always felt that it is not proper for anyone but a human being to decide what happens to a student, or whether a student can proceed with an exam or anything like that. And so it was time for us to take a pretty extraordinary step and get a product out of our product stack that didn't align with that belief. Not so much in the way it was originally designed, but we had to, sort of adapt to what we found, how people were using it, which is that they weren't actually reviewing the videos. And that was not unique to our product. That's unique to that technique, right? Which is something is going to watch a student technologically and then expect a faculty member to go in and do the work afterwards. It's an extraordinary amount of work. And I don't think it's fair to ask faculty to do that work after sort of realizing the amount of work that it creates. And we as an organization want to make sure that we're using and putting technology and putting solutions into the market that actually solve the problem. And so if you're not actually going to stop people from cheating and adjudicate that whole process, then there's no point in buying any technology or deploying any kind of technique if you don't believe that part is important.
Right. Well, and yeah, that's like fascinating too. I mean, yeah, just one of those things where it's like when it's out in the world and, I don't know, again, just reviewing your hypothesis once it's like actually like, I don't know, going to be engaged by people, but yeah, I mean, and I think that's just really good on you for, recognizing that sort of shortcoming and making that change so that, yeah, because I think, you can get into situations like any organization where they just sort of put something in place so they can kind of pat themselves on the back and be like, well, I mean, we have the proctoring software. So, I mean, like, we're good, right? And it's like, well, I mean, it's like doing this thing and you're not actually like,
right,
doing kind of 100% here. Like you're doing like, most of the way, but not all the way. So, yeah, like it could just be a security blanket, but not much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, the critical question that we think everybody should ask and that we try to make sure that we build programs that can answer this question is, whatever it is you're doing to ensure academic integrity in your program, how do you know it's working? Like full stop after that question. How do you know it's working? And what we found is that a lot of times when you're using the more technological and frankly cheaper ways of doing that, you can't answer that question, right? Because you don't either have the process or the data or anything else in place. And so The thing that I would say to any school that's considering either making a change in the way that they ensure academic integrity or building new programs or whatever it is, how do you answer that question? How do I look at an accreditor and say, okay, I know that the people that I'm giving this credential to did the work. And if you don't know how to say that, and factually based, not, well, don't tell me a bunch of techniques that people do, because anybody can come up with techniques. What are data points that we can look to and say, I feel comfortable that those data points tell us that we've got a healthy program? If you don't have those data points, then it's really hard to figure out whether or not you're just wasting money. We call it inside of Measure Learning, we want to make sure that we're not having people do what we call security theater, which is something that looks great. And you go, look at that. Look what that camera does. But it really doesn't actually stop cheating. We want to make sure that we have data points that we can track and iterate on and measure with the school and ask the school, what do you think about these data points? That tell us whether or not we're doing a good job. And a lot of those data points are really simple. It is, hey, 1,000 students took this exam, and we had X amount of students that were in a situation that you had to look at, right? Is that enough? Is that too many? Is that just right? Is it not enough? We can argue that question, for hours. But the point is, if you're not measuring that, then you probably shouldn't be doing anything at all, right? Otherwise, it's sort of security theater to kind of make people feel good about it, but not actually have a measurable thing that we can see. We can actually go and say, if you have this type of program, you should expect to see, human nature is going to tell you that X% of students are going to try to do something here. And I wish it was 0, but it's not, right? And I always make the joke that the thing that gives me comfort that there'll always be a business for an academic integrity company is human nature, right? It is, as long as there has been things that people want to achieve, it is going to be human nature that there will be a subset of humans that will try to take a shortcut to get it. And it is imperative that we stop that from happening so that everyone believes in the credential. And it's the eat your veggies argument about academic integrity that's sometimes not popular, but the damage that academic integrity or a lack of academic integrity can do to a program is kind of long-term, right? It's a overall damaging of their reputation. It's an erosion of the respect of the graduates in the workplace. It's everybody kind of knowing somebody that, oh yeah, that person cheated on that exam, or, oh, well, I took this program at this school and yeah, they, quote unquote, they trusted us to they know we're going to be working adults, and that's whatever sort of rationalization you hear people make. That damages the reputation of an institution. And once people stop believing in the bachelor's degree or the master's degree that comes from that university, then there is a serious problem, because that people's belief in that credential is what sort of everything stems from for a university. That's the original core reason that people are going to college and people are trying to get that credential. And so it's really important to get that right.
Yeah, absolutely. So much good stuff there. I mean, just, like why this is so important, but also just like, I love the phrasing of security theater. That's just a great little shorthand for, like making sure the things that you do matter, have some intentionality around them. And I give you that quantifiable kind of assuredness versus it being just kind of, anecdotal. Because I feel like that comes up so much about just, again, I guess sort of a human nature kind of thing. It's just like decision making, just being kind of like, just like going for my gut because of, what I've personally observed or feel, versus like, well, we actually have like student survey data that tells us exactly like what they like and don't like, or, like we're right on average on what you'd expect for, kind of human behavior in terms of, cheating. Cause like what you said there, like what it made me think of is like that idea of human nature. Cause it's like, cause like little kids are always trying to like sneak cookies out of the cookie jar kind of thing. And it's like, they know it's wrong. They get caught and, they feel ashamed and all that, but like they're still going to try because they want to do it. Like if it's just like, oh, cool. Like I could easily just get what I want and maybe like, get away with it. Like, it's not even like saying anything about people or it's like, oh, like, these are bad people or something. It's just like,
No,
hey, like
they're not bad people. There's another element of this that's really at play, and that we sort of learned through the years of doing this, that people will respect what you inspect. And so what that means is, if you're not checking for cheating, if you go and talk to any student in that class and ask them, do you think your faculty member or your school or whoever, do you think they care if you cheat on the exam? Many of them will say no. And the rationalization is, remember, everyone's the hero of their own story, right? So they're not the villain. They're not cheating. They're thinking to themselves, well, if they really cared, they would be checking. And if you don't believe that, ask any students, ask students in programs that are relying on the honor system, what do they think the university really thinks? If you ask that faculty member or you ask that administrator, they're going to say, well, absolutely, we care about academic integrity, and we have an honor code and everything else. If you go ask a student where they're not actually checking for it, students almost always say, well, I mean, yeah, but they don't really care, right? And then they'll rationalize, well, we'll be able to look this up when we're in our career, and whatever rationalization they have. But students will not interpret it as important if you don't actually put real friction in place. And unfortunately, you have to define it as friction, because, that's part of the process, is that we have to make sure that we're checking that the student is actually the correct person. We have the old mantra, right? You have to see the student, you have to see what they're doing, and you have to know who they are. And if you can't check those 3 boxes, then it's hard to know whether or not that person actually did it. But the process of doing that tells the students involved in that course that this is important. And there's another element that you can do to have a really healthy program, which is not only have a technique to stop people from cheating, or have some kind of program in place that has measurable results, but also to put a statement in the syllabus, or put something right before the exam, before they click into an exam, that says, you are expected to be the one doing this work. You are here, and here is the rules. And if you think about sort of like the psychological process there, you are reminding a student right before they get into an exam of what your expectations are. And it is a lot harder for a student to rationalize, or for any human being to rationalize doing something contrary to that right after they read that's, you know what I mean? That's not, you're saying to them, these are important to me. And if they walk right into the test and break those rules, it's harder. It's a much smaller subset of people that can do that mentally, right, and feel okay. And so there's a lot of science that goes into this. I can tell you that when I was in school, I certainly didn't think I was going to be the dweeb that talked about academic integrity on podcasts and everything. But what I've sort of grown to understand through the years is this is such an essential process to a healthy education program. The fact that people believe that you, the graduate with a degree, actually did the work is essential for the entire sort of structure of academia to flow from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's important stuff. I mean, there's a lot that's like, yeah, maybe not the like flashy, sort of work of higher education. I think of just like, just generally like student conduct work, but absolutely crucial. And, I appreciate you and others committing themselves to this work. And yeah, I mean, so much good stuff that you shared there. And I think that, just really good food for thought of just like, this really like necessary thing, and something that I'm sure everyone, has their tool and strategy around, but it's like how you do it is so important. And I think just a lot of good advice for folks and stuff that you said there. So
I would love to, I'd love to leave sort of a couple of thoughts for people that are listening. If you're thinking about the academic integrity program at the institution where you work, the first thing is you need to ask yourself, how do I know that people are not cheating? Or specifically, how do I know that this is working, whatever it is that I'm doing? And your answer should be something that is not emotional, right? Data doesn't have feelings, right? So a data point that you can point to and debate whether that data point is correct. It should not, the answer to how do you know this is working should not be a list of methods. So for instance, if I say to someone, that had people taking an exam in a classroom. How do you know people are not cheating, or how do you know this is working? And they go, well, so I have people spaced 3 desks between them, and we alternate the papers as we hand them out, and those are all methods, right? And those are all sure healthy things to do that could help you, but don't necessarily block a student from getting access to the exam before it was handed out. Or so you have to actually find things to point to that are unemotional and tell you specifically whether whatever it is you did worked, right? So that's sort of thing number one. Thing number two is you have to actually think through how students are prepared for whatever it is that you're going to do, right? So if they're going to be expected to be on camera, talk about where it is, how appropriate it is for a student, where they should be, where they shouldn't be, and make sure they understand their choices in the matter. The more choice you can give them, the more comfortable they're going to feel with it. And also tell them where to go if something goes wrong. This is what you do if you feel like something goes wrong. You go here, and this is how it will be taken care of. And then the third thing is, if you are requiring your faculty or anybody in the institution to be a part of this process, then you have to train them how to do it, right? And give them, be clear on what the expectations of the workload will be for that, so that they know what to expect and they are prepared, they've trained, they've asked any questions, and they know what to do. So those are the 3 things I always say. If you're building an academic integrity program, you want to make sure you have data points to tell you whether or not it's working. You want to make sure you prepare students and explain to them what's coming and what their choice is in the matter. And you want to prepare anybody involved in the process, especially if it's faculty who are expected to do a lot of extra work.
Yeah, all really great advice. And what I was gonna end on for the previous question too is just like how much I love, because I definitely think about this a lot too. Of just sort of like, you know, I'm trying to think of like the right like metaphor or turn of phrase, but just that idea of, where your priorities are, like kind of comes through of like where you put the emphasis and what you measure and all that. So, yeah, because I think like any organization or like places that I've worked where it's just like, okay, I'm spending my time, in my job every week in the areas that you keep emphasizing. Because you might say like, oh, well, all these things are important. It's like, well, you keep only hammering in on like number
Right.
one. So like,
Right.
that's what I'm going to aim for. Like all those other things, I'll get to it if I can. But
Yeah.
yeah, just stuff like that. I like, yeah, just swirling in my mind there.
People respect what you inspect, right? And I'm not the author of that statement, but I remember the first time I heard it. I wish I could credit the person I heard it from, but it's really the truth. The things that you spend organizational energy measuring are the things that you inherently tell everyone involved are the most important data points, the most important pieces to show whether or not you're successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're coming up on time, but I always do like to give an opportunity if there's things that you wanted to highlight in terms of resources on this topic from, Measure or anywhere else, stuff that's grabbing your attention that we can put in the show notes.
Take a look in the show notes. Look for the Student Bill of Rights. That was a big effort for us. The intent there was to engage with sort of the stakeholders in the industry and figure out exactly what people should expect from a technology partner. And additionally, if you're a faculty member at an institution and you have questions, I am by no means the expert. I get the benefit of being able to get on a podcast and talk about it, but we have people far smarter than I am in measure learning, who some of our psychometrics and certainly our Chief Compliance Officer, Dr. Ashley Norris, are very, very good at helping institutions, not just proctor exams, but think about assessment holistically. And where is the data coming from? How do you know where your questions are coming from? How do you know they're not being given to other people? And most importantly, how do you know that the person that took this exam actually knows the material? And that's not just a product of proctoring. It's a product of good assessment design. It's a product of measurables and everything else. And I know a lot of faculty get really passionate about that, and that's awesome. And I think we should empower them to build measurement tools, which are assessments and other things, so that they feel good that the students in their courses are the ones that are getting that did the work and are getting the credential.
Very good. Great. Well, we'll end it there because I think you've already shared such incredible, amazing insights and stuff for folks to think about and take away. And we'll have ways to connect with you and measure and the Bill of Rights that you mentioned in the show notes for this episode. So just thank you so much, though, for your passion and all that you shared and your time, Jarrod. And this is really great stuff.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here. Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.